Hello everyone, welcome to my selected chess channel. Here I share the newest and most exciting chess games with you. Today I'm bringing you a truly brilliant battle that has just been played. Hikaru Nakamura is playing with the white pieces, and Salem Saleh is playing with the black pieces. Let's dive right in and enjoy the action together. Hikaru pushes the pawn from c2 to c4, a spear striking into the center, opening lanes for his pieces. If Salem dares, d5 Hikaru is ready to snap back with cx d5, breaking structure. Salem answers with a 7f5, an aggressive claim on the middle. If Hikaru rushes d2 to d4, Salem will instantly x4, trading center tension with a smirk. The knight jumps to c3, pointing at the heart of d5 and supporting the spearhead pawn. It feels like Hikaru is loading a spring trap. Salem calmly plays dix, reinforcing f5 and keeping the center solid. Black is saying, "You won't break me that easily." Hey, why? Pawn to e3, a flexible move, preparing d4 and opening a window for the dark square bishop. Quiet, but dangerous. He slams 5, storming forward with Dutch-style ambition, already threatening f4 to squeeze space. That's bold firepower on the king side. Hikaru strikes back with d4, taking the challenge, and the board ignites. Now pawns are clashing for central dominance. Bishop to a7, smooth development while keeping f6 open. Salem saying, "Come on, show me your hand." Niar. The bishop comes out to d3, aiming at the king side like a sniper, lining up the a7 pawn. Salem must keep an eye on sacrifices. He castles short, tucking his king away and daring Hikaru to attack. Safe for now, but fireworks are brewing. Knight lifts to f3, attacking f5 and reinforcing d4 to d. White's army is mobilizing at full speed. Enchiike strikes back at d4, putting pressure on the pawn chain. The tension in the center tightens. Queen steps to c2, adding another eye on a4 and e7. Subtle hint, Hikaru's dreaming about a kingside storm. Salem pushes ga6, carving the home for his bishop on g7. A solid fianchetto shield begins. Hikaru castles kingside, securing his monarch and preparing the rooks to join the war. The guns are locked and loaded. Bishop to g7, the dragon finally breathes fire from the long diagonal. That height, a1 line now belongs to Salem. Pawn advances to b3, reinforcing c4 and preparing bb2 Quiet steal, he's setting up long-range artillery. The queen rises to 8, flexing to swing toward a5 or ga6. Black is whispering about a kingside strike. Bishop plants on b2 and suddenly the diagonal toward g7 and f5 is locked in. A clash of long-range weapons. Salem drives e4, a dagger into white's center. Suddenly the board feels sharp, double-edged, and dangerous. The knight sidesteps to d2, aiming to reroute toward f1 j3, dreaming of pressure on a4. Hikaru is regrouping for the storm. Salem lifts the knight to f6, centralizing and pointing straight at f4, d4 f4. The beast is coming alive. Pawn slides to f3, directly challenging the intruding pawn on e4. Hikaru wants clarity before the fire spreads. He exchanges x3 or y de portunikai, shao. The shot is fired, and the center explodes open. White's king's safety will now be tested. The bishop calmly recaptures on f3, holding the balance and eyeing b7. Hikaru turns a weakness into initiative. The rook swings from a8 to bait, pointing straight at White's b3 pawn. Pressure, 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 back. Rook joins on a1, countering the b-file tension. The heavy artillery is now staring each other down. The queen steps to g6, pointing at g2 and whispering dark threats. Suddenly, White's king feels watched. Rook lifts to f2, doubling defense of g2 and giving flexibility to swing laterally. Hikaru plays resourcefully. Bishop glides to d7, calmly connecting rooks and preparing c5 da. Black's house is fully built. Pawn nudges fr, expanding on the queen side, trying to distract Salem from his kingside ambitions. He pushes h5, lunging forward with aggressive intent. The attack is sharpening like a knife. Knight jumps to f1, heading toward g3, where it will bite into f5 and ha5 fight. It's a rerouting masterclass. Rook swings to 8, reinforcing e-file and preparing tactical shots down the e-file. The pressure grows. The knight completes its journey to g3, now staring directly at f5 and hi5. Salem's pawns are under crossfire. He lunges with h4, slamming the pawn forward, poking White's knight and keeping the attack rolling. Hikaru calmly retreats the knight to f1, regrouping and refusing to be shoved off balance. Patience is power. Bishop steps to h6, threatening to exchange Hikaru's dangerous dark-squared bishop. Black sharpens the blade. Rook slides to e2, preparing to double rooks on the e-file and fight back in the center. He brings the other rook to a7, loading up on the same file. The e-file is now an open battlefield. Hikaru slides his queen to a1, quietly aligning with the rook and eyeing h4 chiwi. A silent but deadly setup. Salem tucks the queen back to h6, staring at White's bishop and hinting at an exchange sacrifice. Hikaru coolly plays g3, giving his king breathing space and blocking any h4 3 jab story. Safety first, attack later. Salem shoves g5, a brute force advance, throwing wood into the kingside fire. Black is playing for blood. The knight jumps back to d2, preparing f1 e3 and trying to reroute toward f5. Precision under pressure. Salem lashes out with Faur, shutting lines and cramping White's bishop baraya. The king's side is burning hot. The bishop retreats to g2, maintaining diagonal power and keeping fr, a7 in view. A defensive recoil with venom. Salem follows up with f3, stabbing deep into White's camp, locking the bishop in its cage. Savage intent. The knight reroutes to f1, heading to e3 to fight back against the thorn on f3. Calm under fire. Salem calmly places his bishop on g4, aiming at e2 and pinning resources. A new front of pressure opens. Rook drops to f2, reinforcing the second rank and shielding g2 2-0. A fortress maneuver. Salem brings the rook to f7, stacking behind the pawn on f3 Diane. The squeeze tightens. The bishop shuffles to hone, unpinning and keeping eyes on the long diagonal. Awkward but necessary. Salem doubles rooks with RB fight, loading cannons directly against Hikaru's king. The battery is ready to fire. Pawn to a5, expanding on the queen side and begging for counterplay. A jab in the opposite theater. Salem calmly captures bx5, snapping white's wing and saying, "Don't distract me, I'm coming for your king." No. The knight emerges to e3, pointing directly at f5 and g4. A counterpunch is forming. Salem swings his rook over to f6, guarding g6 and reinforcing pressure. The rook is now a shield and a hammer. Hikaru tries gx4, opening the h-file at great risk. Courageous or reckless? Time will tell. The queen instantly takes h4, leaping into white's camp like a predator smelling blood. Knight shifts to f1, clinging to defense and staring at g3 squares. Barely holding. The queen bites g3, snapping the pawn with venom. Black's queen is in white's face. Hikaru dares hx4, capturing and trying to untangle the kingside. A desperate counter. Rook, g6, recaptures, swinging across and keeping lethal threats alive. The attack doesn't stop. The queen rises to d2, connecting rooks and aiming to counter black's queen. Thin ice but resourceful. Rook four jumps in, a monster on the 4th rank, hammering down on g4 dart. Devastating presence. Rook a1 doubles up with the queen, trying to fight fire with fire on the e-file. Salem plays bg5, sliding in with surgical accuracy, threatening fx3 bombs. Rook done shifts across to cover d4 and give flexibility. Scrambling for counterplay. Bishop h3 cuts into white's dark squares and pokes at g2. Like a knife through armor. Rook h2 desperately guards g2 and holds the king side. His army is bending, but not yet broken. The queen slides to g4, swarming white's defenses. The predators are circling. Rook f2 challenges, meeting queen head-on. White refuses to bow. The queen retreats to hey f5, patient and calculating, still pressing on g4 dart. Knight hops to h2, clinging to defense and aiming to trade teeth for teeth. Bishop h4, sharp and ruthless, directly threatening white's rook. Rook f1 steps aside, still covering g2 2-0. A breath of survival. Queen d5 comes back into striking range, eyes blazing toward g3 and e3. The bishop retreats to cone, guarding g5 and h6 die. White still clings to life. Rook g3 lunges into enemy territory, staring at g2 with brutal force. The battlefield is on fire. Hikaru lashes out with nf1, trying to shield g3 and h2. White's knight is clinging to dear life. Salem smashes with bh3, stabbing at f1 and daring Hikaru to crumble. Rook swings to d2, stacking reinforcements, holding the brittle walls together. A desperate barricade. Salem doubles rooks with rg7, lining every cannon at white's king. The queen slides to a1, regrouping, trying to trade queens and neutralize the firestorm. Salem strikes with bg2, a cold check, slicing through the defenses and forcing concessions. Hikaru captures with Rxe2, taking the bishop but opening the floodgates to new attacks. The Black Queen replies Qxe2 and, check, not mate yet, dragging the White King further into chaos. Hikaru is forced to take Kxg2, walking naked into the fire. Salem slams Rg7 a thunderous check. The king is hunted like prey. Hikaru ducks Kone into the corner, the last sanctuary on the board. Salem resets with Rf6, calmly lining up for a crushing swing. Black is in full control. The queen tries Qf2, desperately offering trades, a white flag of survival. But Salem shows no mercy. Rxf2, ripping the queen from the board. Hikaru recaptures Rxf2, but his army is skeleton thin. Salem answers Rxf2 again, shredding Hikaru's defenses further. The knight finally takes Ncf2, halting the bleeding, but the damage is immense. The rook storms down with Rg3, hunting the White King like a wolf in the night. Hikaru steps Kh2, inching away, but the walls are closing. Salem checks again with Rg2 Anu, relentless as a drumbeat. The king shuffles Kone back into the corner, shivering in the dark. Salem scoops another piece with Rxf2, tightening the noose. The knight jumps Ang4, last defender shielding the monarch. Brave, but late. Salem pins with R4, pressing the knight to the board. Brutal technique. The rook swings Ragon, seeking counterplay, eyes on the g-file. A desperate swing of the sword. Salem clamps down with Rf3, sealing control, locking g3, and waiting for the kill. Hikaru inches K2 forward, pretending to escape, but nowhere to run. Another hammer blow, Rf2 on, the king trembling under fire. Hikaru staggers Kh3 into the flames, trapped in a burning cage. Salem unleashes Rate F3, a double rook check, domination incarnate. Hikaru shows insane courage with Kxh4, grabbing a pawn in the firestorm. Salem replies Rh2 on the cold-blooded check, cornering the king on the edge. The king bolts Kg5, running into the open, a fugitive monarch. Rook lashes again with Rg2 on, another blow to the fleeing king. Hikaru dashes Kh upward, a king on a mad adventure. Salem stabs Rf6, precision strikes raining down. The king slides Kg5 sideways, dodging bullets. And then Salem calmly centralizes his monarch with Kj7, absolute confidence in victory. A meaningless pawn push b4 follows, more like a sigh of resignation. Salem captures Axe b4, underlining total control of the board. Hikaru slides Rf3, bringing a rook into the third rank to contest Black's invasion and shore up the e-file, a calm, stubborn bid to wrestle back activity. Salem plants Qd1, the queen aggressively intruding into White's camp and eyeballing the back ranks, a probing invasion that demands an answer. Hikaru replies Rf2 and N1, rook to f2 with check, forcing the king to move while trying to simplify by trading off attackers. Salem sidesteps kb3. The king steps oddly forward to b3, active, risky, intent on staying in the fight rather than hiding. Hikaru blasts Ndix, a knight jump into the enemy lines to stab at key squares and aim at seat eat, a sacrificial feel, seeking counterplay. Salem answers RD2, sliding a rook to D2 to contest the second rank and try to blunt White's knight incursion. Hikaru strikes Re3, rook to E3 delivering a check, and forcing the king to keep dancing while White hunts for tactical relief. Salem ducks KB4, the king shuffles to B4, a brittle refuge, but one that keeps pressure on the opposing camp. Hikaru tiers Refure, a rook check to pry open escape squares and keep the tempo, relentless like a cavalry charge. Salem plants RD4, a bold rook advance into the center, aiming to cut off lines and trade into a favorable simplification. Hikaru answers RxD4 feet rook, takes rook on D4 with check, ripping away Black's active file holder and forcing immediate resolution. Salem replies QxD4, queen captures on D4, recapturing and reasserting central dominance. The queen plunges back into the throat of battle. Hikaru slides Refar, rook to F4 occupying the E file and threatening to pry open Black's center with heavy pieces. Salem executes KXI5, king captures on C5. The monarch scoops up material in the center and dares White to punish its audacity. Hikaru answers RxD4, rook captures on D4, taking the queen that had landed there, grabbing back decisive material in a tactical flurry. Salem retorts KXD4, king captures on D4. The monarch steps into the center to take the active rook. Raw, practical, unstoppable momentum. Hikaru drives H4, a pawn push to pry open the king's side and create luft, a small hammer blow in the desperate search for chances. Salem strikes B4, a pawn punch on the flank to blunt White's pawns and create a wedge. The response is cold and surgical. Hikaru answers A5, continuing the pawn battering on the king's side, trying to tear open shelter and expose Black's monarch. Salem surges K5, the king advances to F5, central and monstrous. Black's monarch becomes an active combatant, not a bystander. Hikaru pushes H6, a pawn thrust stabbing toward promotion squares and forcing the defender to decide whether to capture or retreat. Salem counters KF6, king to F6, bringing the monarch closer to the fray and refusing to cede initiative or tempo. Hikaru drives 7, the pawn storms to H7, threatening to queen or dislodge key defenders. White keeps trying to flip the script. Salem slides KG7. The king steps back to G7 to block the pawn's ambitions, living dangerously but maintaining control of the H-file. Hikaru reroutes NC4, knight to C4 aiming at B6 and Zix, hunting weak squares and looking for a shock counterswing. Salem executes KX7, king captures on A7, taking the invading pawn, a grim, hands-on collection of material by the monarch. Hikaru leaps N5, knight to F5 with tempo, eyeing chicks in B7, trying to pry open Black's shelter or grab a hook square. Salem slides KGZ6, king to GA6, relocating the monarch into a more active forward post. The king keeps the pressure stoked. Hikaru plays NXC knights. Knight captures on she kicks, scooping material and trying to open lines, a combative capture aimed at unbalancing the position. Salem thrusts B3, pawn to B3, a sharp push on the queen's side that creates a thorn and prepares to crash through White's structure. Hikaru answers Ninifiv, knight to F5 with check, leaping into the center to deliver tempo and hunt for forks or reprisals. Salem responds K5, king to 5, stepping forward under fire to evade checks and keep the king in play. Hikaru shifts ND3, knight to D3, a regrouping move that recenters forces and eyes the fragile squares around Black's king. Salem pushes Kefar, king to E4, The monarch marches boldly into central squares, refusing to be shooed away. Hikaru strikes ncf5 knight to c5 with check, hopping to a domineering outpost and forcing the king's hand again. Salem moves kd4, king to d4. The monarch slithers deeper into white's terrain, chasing the last scraps of safety. Hikaru finishes enx b3. Knight captures on b3 with check, taking the pawn and delivering a sharp final sting, a last desperate bite. That's the end of today's game. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time watching my video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and support my channel. I'll keep bringing you the best and latest games. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.